The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host. For the last two episodes, we've been talking about Sheriff and Chief Glenn. That story is in book 2 of my Afterlife Interrupted series. If you recall, Sheriff, who never gave us a name other than that, he didn't really feel the need to, was employed as the sheriff in a small town. He had the unprecedented experience of seeing a ghostly vision of his sister kind of just from the shoulders up, her head and her hair, ghostly and upset. And he just thought, well, something must be going on. He made his way to his sister's house in this small town, thinking he was on a wellness check, that maybe she had fallen or was having a medical emergency. So he wasn't thinking that he was going to a crime scene. He just thought maybe his sister had a medical issue. Well, he got to her lawn, and as he did, he heard gunshots from in the house and 3 men running out the front door on the porch and down the steps, cursing his sister. Well, he realized that she had just been shot, and the guy that shot her was right there. He drew his revolver, and he said, I didn't go for the legs or the arms. I went for the torso, and I got him. What he hadn't counted on was there was a second gun that was made of white plastic, something that he had gotten on the internet, maybe 3D printer. Anyway, 3 people ended up dead. The sister, sheriff, and the man that he shot and killed. Well, we were only dealing with sheriff. We told that story 2 episodes ago, and then last time we did what are called compassionate response. This episode, we go into spiritual practice that might derive from the details of this story. What Sheriff told us when we first helped him, when he first came to us, was that he understood that first responders from the afterlife were helping him while he was dying. He was dying on the line, and he said, I was busy dying, but already there were people that came to help me who were professionals. They were skilled at what they do. So that was a surprise to him. He said that he wasn't a religious person, didn't spend much time thinking about an afterlife, but he didn't disbelieve in one. When he had occasion to be at a funeral or near a cemetery, or it was Memorial Day, he might ponder what it might be like after one dies. He wasn't religious, but then he said, well, here I was now moving into the afterlife, so I had to acknowledge that it was a real thing. But it was a surprise to learn that there were people sort of like him who had been first responders of one kind or another, and he was being assisted by them. He learned that the place where he went next in the afterlife was a temporary place, and that kind of bothered him. I think he compared it maybe to some sort of holding cell or something that might have been a part of his own work, where someone who's been apprehended or taken into custody or is just being helped by a peacekeeper is in some place that's just for the moment. He didn't want that. He wanted to get on with things. So I kind of liked that about him. I think I have that same temperament. I do like to get on about things. But his issue was that he was just furiously angry at being killed, but he was also angry that the people that killed him had killed his sister. He was angry that his job was to be to serve and protect, and he wasn't able to protect his sister's life. So he had anger going all over the place. They told him he was so impatient that he wanted to move along, and they told him, "Well, you're too angry yet. We need to get that anger down." He he compared it to blood pressure, or it could have been any of a number of things that when you're ill, different systems are monitoring numbers and percentages of things going on in one's body. But he hit upon blood pressure, and he felt like he had to follow directions. They said, "You're just too angry yet," and they wanted to send him in the direction of me and my prayer partners. They didn't say why. They never do. Well, hardly ever do. Um, but anyway, they said, "We're not going to let you go into that man and rage. We have to get uh, your anger down to a certain level." Well, he watched that level. I don't know exactly what he did to try to decrease the intensity of his anger, but he did, and he succeeded to getting it right at the threshold that they had set. And then he pushed. He said, "Look, look, I made it. I got there." And they said, "Yes, but only barely. You have to promise us that you won't go into that man and start raging. You were a public servant. You took an oath to defend people, and we're not going to let you harm him. So you have to promise us that you can stay contained. You can manage your emotions." Well, so today in the spiritual practice part, we're going to talk about anger, and especially anger that gets in the way, that constricts, prevents, takes freedom away. That will be our focus. But before we do that, I was thinking of a quote from St. Augustine. He said something like this, that hope, which is always about a future thing, hope has two beautiful daughters. One of them is anger at the way things are, and the other one is courage that goes about changing them. I wanted to start with that because I don't want to give the impression that anger is always a negative emotion that one ought to work to get rid of. Anger at cruelty and injustice, for example, uh, ought not be gotten rid of. It ought to be paid attention to. And it might be that one's anger is aroused at um, the maltreatment of an animal or a human person, or uh, a deep injustice, a social injustice, where there's a wrongdoing that's happening that could be righted if people got busy and worked at it. So anger sometimes is a positive motivator. With that said, that really wasn't the case so much for Sheriff. So we're going to mostly work in this little podcast on anger as a negative emotion that constricts, because that's what it did to Sheriff. It was holding him back. Remember, too, that in the exchange that we had with him, he didn't go from red hot anger to no anger. He went down a scale and got to a certain place, a kind of calibrated spot that the people helping him designated, and said, "If you'll only get your anger down to this point, then you can move on." So we're not called upon to follow these people into further into their afterlife. We do one session with them to ask permission to use their story. But even there, that's all we're doing. We're asking to use their story. It's a yes or no answer. And we're not probing into their business and what they've done since. If they volunteer that, that's their own business, and they frequently do. But we're but Sheriff got his anger to a certain point. What happened after that is not known to us. So where I'd like to turn next is how I do that. I don't think of myself as an expert in the field, but I'm a human person who's been angry before, and some of that over relatively minor things that passed, and others over things that were not at all passing. And some of them are quite large and not just about my life and my relations and interactions. Some of them are injustices in the world that make me angry. But I do want to focus on personal freedom and the ability to choose one's emotions and not be led around by them. So that's where I want to go next. Uh, when when he was first moving toward me and into me with my permission to be able to speak to my prayer partners, I felt an energy that was uncommon, and I told my prayer partners, "This person has a lot of agitation." Well, within a moment or two, he was moving through me and talking, and he said, "Well, of course I'm agitated. I got murdered." Uh, uh, so I looked up agitate. I love words and where they come from, and um, things that are non-tangible, like agitation, anger. They usually have some more concrete expression. They're based on some concrete thing that's an analogy that describes, in this case, agitation. I looked it up and it said to put in constant or violent motion, to agitate. I was thinking about the agitator inside a washing machine. It's in constant motion. I don't think of that as violent. It's just doing its job to wash the clothes. But um, to ordinarily to agitate has a violent connotation about motion and constancy. I looked up uh, anger, and anger, the emotion, is related to the idea of something being tight and painfully constricted, as though one's hands are bound with chains or rope. That isn't that interesting? That somewhere along the line, people connected anger to being bound, having their hands tied and being unable to move. Well, that's interesting because that was exactly the issue for Sheriff. He was unable to move until he got less angry, uh, less uptight. So that's an interesting way to begin. One thing that one can do when angry is to pay attention to one's breathing and muscles. Uh, are you tight, or like your jaw, when you're angry, are you clenching your teeth? Are you tightening your shoulders and arms? Uh, are you tightening the muscles in your face and head? You could get a headache. Um, uh, One thing that can help just when we become conscious that we're angry and our body is full of anger is to loosen, is to take deep breaths, let air move in and out in a gentle way, um, open our jaw, let it drop. Sometimes our body can show our emotions um, that we have some control of them, and we're not going to be controlled by them. I don't like for my emotions to boss me around. I don't like anybody to boss me around. I have a vow of obedience, so I do obey my superiors when I need to, when there's some issue where I need to act under obedience, even if it's not my preference. But just being bossed around my own emotions, I'm not going to put up with that. I'll talk to myself and say, wait a minute. There's a larger me who's in charge here. My emotions are not me. I'm not much of a linguist. In fact, English is my only practical spoken language. I took 5 introductory Spanish courses, so I'm sort of an expert in introduction to Spanish. But anytime that you try to learn Spanish, you'll probably learn on day one that there are 2 words in Spanish for is. There's only one in English. It conjugates as am, is, are, was, were, but the in English we only have one verb for is. In Spanish, so it has to cover everything. That anything that we predicate is going to be with that verb is. In Spanish, you have to learn right away that there are 2 of them. And if you want to say something is something else in Spanish, you have to figure out which is verb to use. There are 2, ser, S-E-R, and estar, E-S-T-A-R. I'm sorry for those of you that learn Spanish or spoke it as a first language to be dealing with this so elementally. But um, ser is used to say things that are permanent and lasting. Estar is used to say things that are temporary and passing. So you have to get them right. Otherwise, you won't be making sense. So, for example, there are some things about me that are permanent states. I am a man. I am a priest. Uh, uh, so when I want to say things that are permanent about me, I have to say use ser. Uh, Estoy. No, I don't want to do that. Soy sacerdote. I am a priest. That's a permanent state. I've been a priest for 40 years now, and I haven't any intention of changing. It's not temporary. It's a lasting state. So I would say soy. I am permanently this. If I want to say I'm tired, I would say estoy cansado. I am tired, but the verb that I'm using communicates that that's a temporary state that's just in the moment. I am tired right now, but I'm going to take a nap, and later I will not be tired. I will have changed. It's a changeable state. Well, the reason I'm bringing that up is because in English, we can simply say, I'm angry, without any distinction between whether that's a permanent state or a temporary state. Why is that important? Because if you want to, you can stay angry forever if you want. And it's exhausting. I'm wondering if anyone who's listening to or seeing this, are you exhausted from being angry? It takes a lot of energy to be angry. If you thought that it was a permanent state that you can do nothing about, think again. It's an emotion. I have a prayer practice, a meditative practice, where it's a simple negation. I want to suggest to you a little meditative practice that I use, which is a simple negation. It's a way of kind of shedding things, including unhelpful ideas or emotions, and just remembering that I just am. Um, I try to sit still. I usually put the timer on my iPhone, set it across the room for 10 minutes or however long I want to meditate. And then I just try to think of nothing, which is much harder than you would think. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised that when you try to sit still and think of nothing, um, you can wonder, I wonder how long I've been meditating, how much longer. Um, I wonder what I'm going to do after I'm finished meditating. There's ice, there's chocolate cake in the fridge. Um, uh, Later on, I'm going to do that email. You can your mind can just be so cluttered and full of nonsense when you're just trying to be still. So I was taught that you just I don't know why, but I imagine a stream going from left to right across my consciousness. It doesn't have to be that, but that's something that I seem to have settled on. And you can say, "Oh, I'm having an appetite, but I'm not my appetites," and you let the idea of the chocolate cake fall into the river and float away, and then see if you can just be still. And then before long, um, you're thinking of an insulting episode that happened the day before and what somebody said, and having an emotion rise in you that might be anger. And you can say, "Oh, I'm having an emotion. I'm having an emotion, but I'm not my emotions." And you just let that fall into the stream and be carried away. You get the idea that there's a me that's larger than appetites or feelings, emotions, even thoughts. I'm having a thought, but I'm not my thoughts, and the thought can float away. And after a while, you just get a sense that there's a you that's larger than your personal story, what's happened to you, the thing that you're upset about, problems at work. All of those things are not essential to you, they're accidental to you. It's not that they haven't their place, but right now you're meditating and you're just trying to be still, and it's not their turn. You're saying, no, I just want to be still. I don't want to grieve. Uh, I don't want to long for anything. I don't want to hunger. All I want to do is be still and be. If you're faithful to a process like that, after a while, sometimes it gets called the observer. You can, you know how people, when they have an NDE, a near-death experience, often talk about being up and outside of their body looking down on it. I think a similar idea is if after a while you can meditate and watch yourself meditate. You can kind of float above yourself and see yourself meditating. And then you realize that there's a me that's larger than the drama story that's going on all the time. Well, Sheriff Glenn had Sheriff had a huge drama story, having been killed and having his sister murdered. He had reason for his anger, for sure, but he was not his anger. He was still a person that an event happened to. And I don't think that he had been able to separate it too well. Maybe that was part of the calibration that was happening as his, if you will, his blood pressure was going down. But I think he needed to separate out the fact that he was a person who is angry and not just say, I'm angry. I'm angry. It sounds like it describes everything about you, like you wear it on a name tag. Hello, I'm angry. Well, you get the point. Anger is an emotion that I'm having, and it might be one that I have very often because it's the offense was so deep, but still there's more to me than my anger. I'm still capable of cracking a joke, or I'm still capable of eating and drinking and moving about and doing different things. The fact that I'm angry doesn't grind everything to a stop, although the angrier one is, the fewer things you feel like doing. So anyway, being able to separate out, uh, is this a permanent state that's true of me, or is it a temporary state? I'm angry. Is that a permanent state or a temporary state? I want it to be temporary. I want it to be temporary for you because I don't want you to be angry all the time. It's exhausting. Um, there's a few other things that I'd like to mention. I'm not going to go into them into great detail because they probably are more like advanced level of, for a person like Sheriff who he didn't think yet about forgiving the person who did this. In fact, he called him a jerk or something like that. He wasn't anywhere near ready for that. And that might be more than a person can do if they're at the front end of dealing with a large, uh, angry stimuli. But for me, I follow Jesus. And one of the things that he said that has the most impact in my life is, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. How could that possibly be true? A whole mob shouted for him to be crucified. Uh, the temple authorities and the Roman procurator, the whole system collapsed on him. His friends betrayed him. And he just gave a blanket forgiveness to everybody's everything without anybody apologizing. How in the world do you do that? I think that's a universal, um, like substance. I think of that as a universal resource that's available if you ask for it. So sometimes I'll just say to Jesus, I don't know how you did that. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing, but may I have some of that, please? I could sure use some of that. St. Thomas Aquinas taught that grace builds on nature. We use our natural skills to try to affect a thing, like forgiving someone, even if they've not apologized. Um, but then we ask for supernatural grace on top of it to strengthen and uplift us. So I don't attempt to do anything like this. I would pray first and ask to be surrounded by holy ones. I did that before starting this podcast. I have different Saint and Angel friends, include today I prayed for Sheriff and Chief Glenn to be here with me, and I mean it, right, be right around me. I don't mean, sending them some sort of spiritual email or something. I mean, would you come and be here with me right now? So I ask for help that's beyond my ability. It's not necessarily a bad thing to feel powerless to affect change. If you feel that I can't do this on my own, Well, what does that tell you? You're trying to do on your own what's beyond your power. So ask for your higher power to help. So that's what I do. One thing that is important in his case, the cause of his anger was an event that was over and done. He wasn't, there wasn't a continuing assault on his sister or on him. It was a specific, discrete past event that had occurred and was over. Of course, he killed one of the three people that were involved in this home invasion. He never mentioned the other two. Did you notice that? Two escaped at least temporarily, and he didn't tell us anything about whether they were apprehended and tried and sentenced and all that. Sometimes people will say after some adjudication of a crime, well, now he can rest in peace, as though it's a given that anybody that died because of a crime can't rest in peace because their perpetrator hasn't been brought to justice. I think that's a big leap. Um, People are way more specific than just that kind of broad strokes idea that now they can rest pliable in certain cases. But I don't, if that were to happen to me, if I died because of some violent act perpetrated by another, I'm not going to let my afterlife get all clogged up in whether somebody was brought to justice or not. I've got other things to do than worry about such things. And sheriff didn't go into that. But it does matter if the source of your anger is something that's still ongoing. One question is, are you safe? Has something been done to you that continues to be done to you that continues to make you angry? Well, then is there something that you can do to get out of that circumstance and get to a safe place where you're beyond whatever the event is? That sometimes can mean getting out of an abusive relationship or changing jobs or doing something to not allow some unjust circumstance to keep happening. But that wasn't the case for Sheriff. He was dealing with a past event and a certain amount of anger. I remember being very angry at one point in my life. I'm not going to go into the why of it, but it was a circumstance that I was angry because of previous maltreatment, but it was also ongoing, and I didn't have any real control over whether it would stop. I was going to a spiritual director at the time, and he said, "Well, let's at least, we'll do two things. We can at least do shielding prayer. We can ask for Saint Michael the Archangel, your own guardian, and others to step up and try to stand in the breach and protect you from whatever you can be protected from. I'd recommend that. If you can't get out of a circumstance that has harm to you in it, can you mitigate it? Can you let it hurt you less? Maybe it the arrow comes at you and it wounds a bit, but it doesn't pierce you to the heart because you've asked for protective help. Another thing can be um, taking the amount of anger that's in you and going into prayer and saying, "Can you give me a graphic illustration of this and how much of it there is?" In sheriff's case, they pretty much did that. They said, "You have too much anger. Your anger is too hot for you to move from here to there. We need you to get it down." So it involved diminishment that would be incremental. So he had to work over time at getting less angry. Well, how does one do that? Well, one way that was advised to me was by breathing. You might have heard me say this in previous podcasts because I return to it. It's just so basic. When we breathe in Greek, that's to inspire, to bring spirit in, and to expire means to die. We breathe out what's deadly. I breathe in oxygen and nitrogen and the trace elements that are in the air that my body needs. And on the way out, my system cleanses itself. It gives off carbon dioxide that would be toxic were it to stay in me. And then, fortunately, the plants are doing the opposite thing. They're breathing in carbon dioxide that they need to thrive, and they're throwing off oxygen, which to them is a waste product. So sometimes just sitting next to a plant, or maybe gardening, Gardening can be good because it can involve physical exertion that can get your muscles moving just in case you've tightened. Remember, that's part of the word anger is tighten and constrict. Movement can be very helpful in mitigating the effect of anger in a human person. Um, before when I'm breathing, um, I'll sometimes just sit and breathe. If anger is intruding in my thoughts, you know how intrusive anger can be. You're trying to write an email or get something written or a task done, or you're paying your bills or whatever, but then your thoughts return to the angry thing. And now, while you're trying to do a task, you're angry, and then maybe somebody comes in the room and you snap at them because you're angry before they even entered the room. Anger can just be such a buzzkill. It can just get in the way of everything. So it can be helpful in the middle of the day to just stop and say, okay, enough. I know that I'm angry, but it doesn't have to manifest just this minute and just this way. You can tame it and you can tell it you'll have your turn later, but for right now, I'm going to sit still and take a few breaths. In with the good, out with the bad. Count your blessings. Uh, look for beauty. Um, I usually have some flowers nearby because they're cheap. I can go to the grocery store and get the cheapest ones and enjoy having them in my space because I always have something that my eye can land upon that's pretty. That's easy enough. Um, but then one thing I do before sleep to get rid of any kind of emotion that I don't want to contain or that I'd like to have released so that I can be more free and happy is I'll breathe out the thing that I don't want to retain. I can remember a counselor, a spiritual director who was a priest, helping me when I had a lot of anger in my system. I used to, like, first thing in the morning, go into the shower and not want to come out. Uh, there was a period where my life had regular stress in it that I couldn't avoid because this is my workplace, and I would just want to stay in the shower and just imagine the anger, the resentment, the pain going down the drain. That helped me some. I would say, while I'm here in this shower, let my body slough off some of this stuff so that I can go into my ministry and be a happy man and be available to people that have nothing to do with this. People have a right to my presence and for me to be at my best or as near to it as I can get. So I would do that in the shower in the morning. But then at night, um, the spiritual director said, let's think of something ugly, nasty, uh, that would be a graphic image of the anger that's inside you. It needs to be something unpleasant that you'd like to get rid of. And I thought, well, what about shit? I wouldn't like to retain that. I'd like to flush it. So I thought of a mountain of it. And then I thought of trying to get rid of it bit by bit by bit because it had kind of built up in me. And uh, I wasn't a video game guy, but I just was thinking of Pac-Man, that little thing that goes across the screen and it chews away at whatever's in front of it. Um, I thought, could I do that at night? I was taught that we breathe somewhere between 5 and 7,000 times a night. And any of you who know about such things, I'd be interested to hear what you think. Is that correct? I've used that for a long time because a nurse once told me that every time we do, we give off toxins. Our body detoxes. And I was taught that our body detoxes 4 times as much in the night as it does in the day, because in the day, the body's busy keeping you upright and engaged. But at night, a lot of the systems are offline, and the cleaning crew can come in during the night and do a massive cleaning inside you. So before I go to sleep, sometimes I'll say, I want to get rid of this stuff, but I don't need to be the active agent of it. I can let it happen by asking my body to take care of it for me while I'm asleep. Could I please have a full breath load of anger or tension or whatever the negative thing is leave me as I breathe in the night? That one uh, helps for me. Um, I think I'll stop with this one last thought. I'm really determined to try to be a unitive thinker. That is, I believe in the universe, which means the oneness. And I really do believe that God created oneness and that you and I are one, even though there might be distinction. I believe that you're my brother and my sister. I would prefer that we got along and loved each other. That's not always the case, but otherness, thinking of the other as other and not me, it moves into duality. And I find duality is not where I want to live. I want to live in oneness. So I'd rather not think of the other as other. I'd rather think of the other as my brother. So I try to challenge myself with that when I find my thoughts full of accusations towards someone, or building up reasons why I'm entitled to be so angry or whatever. I just don't want to be that way. So I do try. Sometimes if there's a person who's the object of my anger, sometimes I'll get a photo of them, or at least bring one up in my mind, not near bedtime, but in the middle of the day. And I'll say, you know what? Lord, would you help me see the goodness in this person, because I know it's there. You made all of us well. We're all made in your image. Even the worst behaved people are still made in your image. Would you help me see goodness in them? It can help by starting first with someone you love. If you are like me, you probably have a photo of a person or two that you love. That's where you can see it in your living space. I might look at a photo of someone I love and let the sensation of being loved by them move through me, my consciousness, and all through me. And then I'll say, then I have, once I'm feeling loved, I'll say, now I want to bring in the picture of the person who has harmed me. And I want you, Lord, to show me the goodness of them, because I won't see it on my own without your help. Anyway, that helps me sometimes. All of these things I'm thinking of as incremental. Remember that Sheriff was not anger free by the time he left us. He just got less angry so that he was free to move. And remember, anger has to do with being constricted. As he got less angry, he got more free to move. And I'd like that for you, in case that you deal with feeling constricted by anger. Well, this wasn't intended to be a cure-all, just a few suggestions of how you might get started on anger if that's an issue for you. But anyway, that concludes our trilogy on Sheriff and Chief Glenn. Remember that everyone who dies is still alive, and now that Sheriff has entered into our little world and allowed his story to be told publicly and now on a podcast, you could call on him. He wasn't a religious guy, but he'll hear you if you ask him for help. You can ask for him to come and be near you and help you in case you have to deal with reducing anger as he did. Remember also that I'm praying for you. When I do, my practice is to pray that the Holy Spirit, who binds us together, links us, and who knows you through and through, would help you go to whatever place in you is the least free and the most wounded, and bring healing and freedom and joy, because I'm the joyful friar, at least I try to be. That's it for now. I hope you'll join us the next time. If you want to be in touch with me, I can be found at nathan-castle.com. Go to the contact button. If you're going to ask me anything that pertains to the work that my prayer partners and I do, I ask that you at least read one book first so that you know the basics of it, so that our conversation might be enriched. But for now, God bless you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.